Hey everyone, and welcome to Beyond the Raise podcast, where we get under the hood of founder scaling stories. Will and I are here today with Imad Ahmed, founder and CEO of Nanolyse. Welcome to the podcast, Imad.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Great to have you. Thank you for taking the time. So this episode is going to be about, building innovation at speed, a bit about culture, complexity, and the general sort of scale-up challenge. So looking forward to getting into this one. So what we always start with is, for those who don't know, what is it that Nanolyse do, and what's the problem or problems that you are solving?
Okay. Nanolyse is a young company. We started almost 5 years ago. We started from Oxford University. We were trying to spin out, and the company evolved quite a bit. But who we are at the moment, we are a company that's innovation first, technology led. Our market is water, mining, and environmental. And what we are trying to do is to bridge the gap between innovation, that is scientific discovery, and the translation in the real world. So the challenges we are trying to solve is actually really all within the valley of death, where lots of startups and lots of SMEs actually fail. Lots of companies develop very interesting innovations, but then there is no customer. Our customer is not interested. So this is what we are trying to fill in, but we are not doing it as a consultancy. We are not a consultancy. We are innovation people. We use data, we use technology. We bring the market insight to fill that translation gap. This is what we are actually building, and this is who is Nanolyse.
Okay, so it sounds exciting. And then tell me a little bit about, what it's sort of taken the last 5 years to get the business to sort of where it is. It could be from a simple technology standpoint, it could be from a people standpoint, but what sort of from behind the scenes, how's that sort of 5-year journey been?
So when we started as a really clever idea in Oxford University. We were building chemical sensors, the state of the art, the very first chemical sensor, which was able to sense different chemicals in water. We attracted enough money to keep us going. We worked with Teledyne Technologies, which is one of the major technology companies in our sector. And we built the prototype. And we got enough funding actually to do this, surrounded by really excellent people in Oxford University. It kept us going. Where we stopped is when we were hit by the reality of what's the size of the market and how much we were ahead of the curve. We were way, ahead of the curve in terms of the technology we are building, in terms of the regulations wasn't actually ready for us. And when we looked to assess the market, the customer base was small. And for us, in order to build a business around the chemical sensors that we already have a patent for, we need really a large capital to do that. And we need the investor backing as well. So we pivoted quite quickly and we started thinking, okay, that is not the space we want to be in. We've got the expertise, we've got the knowledge around environmental monitoring, around materials. Let's build something really different. And where we pivoted is towards building the company as an environmental intelligence-led, technology-aware sort of business. The company is focused around environmental monitoring. That is our space, and we take monitoring towards implementation. Just to put it really very simply, if you are a water company and you've got sensors deployed in the mud, really you want to know what is actually in the water. That's the monitoring. But then you want to do something with it. If there is a problem, a contamination or a pollution, then you need to do something with it. And this is where the translation of that technology from just a monitoring towards a remediation technology, towards solving the problem. Bringing that solution is the next phase where we come in. So normally when you have a monitoring that is a chemical, it could actually be also biological problem. And then the next step is a solution. Normally that's a remediation. This is where we bring in our materials expertise. All the way to the implementation. Implementation is normally engineering heavy. We are not engineers. We are not a company that build the big stuff, but we can actually advise and help in how implementation should actually be done. and provide the data and the insight to do that. This is where we went from, a small team in Oxford University to what we are trying to build at the moment as Nanolyse.
Was that the regulation was probably the first big one, or would you say there's been other ones along the way as well?
So I think before that, I think there is a very interesting analog I need to bring in, because that will bring what we mean when we talk about our business and the complexity we see and the innovation and the translation. A very nice analog is to think about the innovation and translation as the spark and the stove. So the spark is the invention you create. The fire is very exciting. People come around you and really very exciting, right? But it's dangerous. If you deal with fire alone, it's dangerous, not controlled, right? Stove is the next phase because it's more controlled, it's more useful. People can actually make use of it. It has the boundaries. It's the way to take the spark all the way to the stove, which is actually the translation. So the complexity is normally when you think about moving from innovation or an invention in a lab to the translation, always the complexity is in focus, what
Yeah.
you're actually doing. For us as a company, when we describe ourselves, the way I described ourselves as an environmental technology and we are intelligence led, there are so many things can come up to the table: AI, data, big data, sensors and biosensors, chemicals, and all of these sort of things. And we can't actually deal with all of these. All of these parameters are important, but we can't actually deal with all of these very quickly and at the same time. So what we have to do is to define what we are actually working on, what the market is actually looking for, what is the regulation, because we are in a sector that's very highly regulated. We have to know what is the regulation now and where is the regulation actually moving.
Yeah.
So that brings more complexities into understanding the market. It's not like building a piece of tech or creating, Facebook is complex, but again, it feels more, to me, it feels more linear because it's technology. You build it and you bring customers to it. This is different because we have public health, we have people's lives, we have the environment to take care of. That brings in lots of complexities into the business. I guess this is probably one dimension. The other dimension is where's the money is going to come from, the funding, the investors. And I think environmental technology as a space is one of the spaces that we don't have enough investment. We don't have enough funding in the UK. And that's bring in another layer of complexity into the work we do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a hard market at the moment. We were sat with the director for clean tech for the UK yesterday, and a lot of the work that they do is about policy and helping businesses, especially those in the hardware space. And one of the things that she is seeing relatively often is that people are so focused on that go-to-market strategy, getting very excited about that and all the rest of it, as you would hope. But then they get to that point and go, oh, hang on a minute, there's a really important regulation or policy that actually scuppers our entire plan. I mean, it's not something you just get fixed quickly. And the funding, the world is challenging in the hardware space at the moment as well. So yeah, I totally see what you're saying.
Actually, I'm a big fan of Jeffrey Moore's book. Probably you know it, actually, Crossing the Chasm. It's a fantastic book, actually. It's really about this exact lesson. You have to differentiate between the early interest and the mainstream adoption. You have to, you have to have the data, the insights from the market before making the move.
Yeah, you got to be your customer before you pull the trigger on too many things. Don't assume you know. And now Mr. Ward's managed to rejoin us. He can kick off with his section, which is speed versus structure. Over to you, my friend.
Excellent. Yeah. So, I mean, early on, speed is everything out in a startup. I guess I'm interested to understand at what point do you think that speed starts to create risk?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think if I make a start, there is a startup who's building a piece of tech, speed is everything. You have to be the first mover. You have to disturb the market, first, and you have to bring the product, as soon as possible. Competition is high, etc. So speed is everything, right? In a market where we are in, again, we are dealing with a regulated business, water, environment, mining, even. Speed isn't everything. And actually, sometimes speed can bring in risk. So the most important thing for us is quality standards. These are very important. For example, in a water sector, you can't actually move very fast because that could actually break things. And if you break something in the system, it will affect so many people and it will be very costly. But that doesn't mean we have to be slow, because there are parts of the business relies on using technology. Take, for example, AI and machine learning. I think we need to be absolutely fast in using the tools for the businesses, absolutely fast in learning and being ahead of the curve, and really be ready to move fast in a very fast moving market, right? You would be surprised, actually. I think the water sector is a really very big sector. And I think the industry can adopt a huge amount of these AI and machine learning, but things are moving too slowly because adoption of these tools is actually slow. I guess this is probably one angle. Unless you want to throw a different question.
No, I mean, it's very true. I mean, the water industry is notoriously slow, right? We have clients that are working in that, and they're kind of saying exactly that. The AMP cycles are it's a long period of time, difficult to affect change, things like that. But I mean, I guess conversely to that, are there moments where you've had to almost deliberately slow things down, perhaps in an ability to move faster long term, or is that something you've come across?
So let me throw a funny story, very quick one, which actually can give a little bit of thinking in between the lines. So in a recent past, actually, I was asked by a new coming MD in a company. I'm not going to name it. And I was asked to create an innovation system for the company that actually doesn't have the capability within 2 weeks. That is super fast, right? To create an innovation system in 2 weeks, very fast. And in a way, we know it doesn't actually make sense. It's not going to happen. It won't work, right? But you've got these sort of demands from some people who really, really want to push the business, want to push the idea too fast to the point where it actually breaks very quickly. So I think this is probably one of the areas where you have to be absolutely careful, and it varies from one innovation area to another. Sometimes you could actually go really, really fast, and you really want to be fast, and you want to be faster than your competitor. In other places, you really want to slow down, understand the place, the space properly. And actually, we are going to talk about culture later, but I think there is considerations here about the people who are driving the business, how fast it's actually going, because you have to take care of the people who are actually doing it, because sometimes moving too fast can actually break the culture and actually bring a very toxic culture, and that breaks innovation. So these things has to be considered.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think fine. Yeah, I think if you're right, if you are trying to beat a competitor, then I understand the desire for speed, but I don't, when you're talking about what the type of thing that we are in that sort of clean tech space, I can't really think of many examples where it has been a positive thing. I think it normally causes a bit of a bad environment. I think morale can dip. I think, as you say, you risk breaking things. And I don't think many people in the business see the upside. They just sort of think this is almost coming from an overly ambitious, slightly greedy person or people. So I think you're totally right. And then just sort of on that, what have you seen that sort of tends to break first as companies tend to scale?
I think it's a very difficult question, because you have to define the size of the company. Because if you want to scale and you want to move faster, you have to have the capacity to do that. And I think if you don't have the capacity, the very first thing it will break is people. The morale, the culture, that would break first. Also, it depends if the company is very much R&D led. I think scaling in the wrong direction can also kill R&D and kill innovation.
Yeah.
So you have to do it really, really very carefully.
Yeah. Well, I guess if you're rushing the R&D side of it, yeah, you're probably going to go 3 steps backwards before you go forwards at all because you're not doing it properly, right? So it's short term and long term a bad idea. And then just with that sort of, I guess culture under pressure sort of lens, what do you sort of feel is hardest to maintain as a company grows on that sort of culture piece?
I guess clarity is the most important bit. Because with the scale, you've got ambiguity coming into the business. And, once again, talking about culture, I think the management team has to go to the people and clarify why we are scaling up, why we are going at that sort of a speed. But I guess also clarity, it doesn't mean just the message. It also means, the focus of the business, where we are actually going. Because sometimes the scaling up means broadening the business, and what that exactly means to the business in terms of, do we have the right number of people, the credible people, the professionals, the experts? Do we have all of that in order to scale up? And I think people always the ones on the front line when it comes to scaling up the business. The other thing it comes into play is where's the money is going to come from, right? You are scaling the business, and definitely either if you have enough capital to scale up the business, that's fantastic. If not, then actually you are putting some people at risk of leaving the business because you want to scale in one direction and you have to let some people go. So it's a very complex situation, very complex scenario.
Yeah. Where do you, well, that's a really good point. So where do you feel that sort of misalignment can creep in that scenario? Because it's quite common that it does, but what have you sort of seen in terms of that misalignment piece, perhaps?
So yeah, the misalignment would be in this case internally between the staff, the team, and the management team. That's number one. Number two would be between the business itself and the customers. The third one would be between the business itself and the market direction. Right. So, and I think the most dangerous one is the last two. If you are scaling in the right direction with the wrong direction and the wrong capabilities and with the wrong tools, you will lose your customers. You will lose the sight of the market direction, and that's very costly.
Yeah, that sort of customer centric piece is what I think we've seen over the years that it's really become a super laser focused part. And if you're not customer centric and thinking about that from day one, I think you are setting yourself up for a bit of a shock or a surprise along the way. But I think that's quite often happens as well. I think a lot of people, founders, get too focused on the idea rather than who are you serving, what are you serving, and how are you going to do that. And you've got to be asking those questions all the time to make sure that what you're building is actually going to solve the problem you think. And sometimes we speak to people and think, well, that's cool. What problem are you trying to solve? I don't think that is a problem, but they've got so caught up in it, they've not thought about that for a second. And if, in terms of, you talked a little bit about adapting and changing earlier, but with this sort of culture piece in mind, has there been any sort of adaptations or changes that have had to happen over the years?
For us, we learned quite a lot of lessons, actually. So when we started as an R&D team. Building pieces of equipment. And of course, we had to surround ourselves with the best of the best in the field, right? These are professors and scientists and engineers to do the work. But I guess things has changed because we learned it's not actually enough to have a team of academics around you. You really need people who understand the market, people who can actually go to the customers and speak to them. You need that sort of relationship with the industry, the customer who's gonna buy your piece of equipment. And also you need people, these were the advisors come kind of, and you want people who can come and challenge you and say, look, this is going nowhere. right? There is no market for this, or the market is small, or there isn't much money, or go out of the UK, go to Europe. There is more money probably there for your own sort of business. These sort of things they don't come in one day. They take time. But I think the most important lesson is for anyone who is starting the journey is to surround themselves with the right people. I think for us, if we had the right people from the very beginning, probably would have been much faster in our journey than where we are at the moment.
Yeah. It's just so difficult to get that right, isn't it? And I think a lot of founders rely too much on their own network, which is fine to start with, but I don't think that's the long-term play, but it's the obvious one that you do to start with. But yeah, Will and I talk about that a lot in terms of like the hiring strategy and getting it right from the start. A lot easier said than done, for sure. Over to you, William.
Talking about decision-making at scale, right? You mentioned there, and I really agree with the importance of being able to change direction. How's your internal decision-making changed as the business has grown?
So I think there is a very important decision we made around people we want to hire as we grow, which is actually we are coming up with a very interesting business model which we are actually testing at the moment. So because we are not a consultancy, and the type of people we are actually looking for are quite particular, because they will have to have a combination of different expertise, from technology to understanding, the sectors we are serving. At the same time, we want to keep the business very lean. We don't want to go like big consultancies and go and hire 10 today, another 50 in a couple of years' time, and grow that way. We don't want to do it this way. The way we want to do it is very much like, following the Hollywood film production. So it's a very interesting one, because in a film production, years ago, they used to go and hire, hundreds of people who will be on the roads and, walking around, and then they used to pay them. But in recent years, this has changed. So you have a core team, and then you have a role. So you go to the type of person you need for that particular role, you pay the hours, that person comes in, does the role, and thank you very much. Right? We are adopting very much the same sort of thing. So what we have a very strong core team with advisors and people who understand the market and understand the technologies. And some of us, actually, including myself, I'm a developer and I develop things myself. But then the circle around us would be the subject expert who we would bring in, on a project by project basis. That means for us, we won't have to hire all of these experts. They don't have to be on the payroll, right? So the company is lean. That's one thing. And the other thing, it also allows us to expand the offering we provide without having so many people we have to worry about their salaries and the capital that comes with that. So that's the sort of business model we are adopting at the moment, and I think it's an interesting one, and we'll see how that actually goes. By now I forgot what was the question.
Yeah, I think you've answered it, and no, you absolutely did answer the question. Very, very sensible strategy. Do you think though that makes decision making more simple or more complex, that model?
Look, this is a direction to grow. And like any other company, when you have a plan for growth, decision making becomes more complex. It's not because the way we operate, it's because the number of different types of customers we are serving. That makes decision making, the business itself, a little bit more complex. But I think there is a way to do it right here. It's about letting go. For me, I'm the founder. I don't want to be the expert in the room. I want to surround myself with the right people who can actually provide the expertise in different fields. So I think learning, letting go, and giving the patent to someone else to drive a particular area is something we should learn and we should practice, but we should do it with a discipline. There has to be governance around that, and this is what the core team should be doing, right? Advisors, once again, are really very important in what we do. The Nanolyse business is built on partnership. So, for example, one of the projects that we delivered recently, a very nice project, we called it Mosaic. So the project is for the very first time, what we've done, created an AI system which integrates satellite data with chemical, biological, environmental, meteorological data in one of the farms in Devon. The project was funded by the SCFC, and the nice thing about it is that sort of integration we brought in. I talked about partnership because we couldn't actually have done that without going and partnering with two space companies. So it's again letting go. It's not just about decision within the company. It's also about letting go and going to other partners and say, look, I can't do that, but I'd like to do it. Can you help me? Can you come and partner with me? So, and I think it's very important not to be too rigid about the IP. I think there has to be some flexibility in terms of, partnering with people, bringing, external expertise into the business. And I think for me, the most important thing is delivering really valuable, high impact projects to people. That's the most important thing, right? And that's the philosophy, and this is the way we want to do it.
Did you find letting go quite challenging though? Because I think a lot of founders, I would argue, is probably the thing that they struggle with the most.
The temptation is always like a founder is not to let go, right?
Yeah.
But no, it's not an easy thing, but I think all founders has to practice it. You have to put the arrogancy and the temptation to be the leader and, in every single step of the business on the side, and instead build a team who will actually really work together. And this is really the kind of thing I learned by working in other businesses in the past. I think this is back again to the building the culture right. You have to build the culture at the very top to be collaborative, to be role model and all of that. I think that's really important.
Yeah. Totally agree. But as we talked about earlier, it's not easy. You normally find you have to go through a few iterations to sort of get it right. So with that sort of hiring for, innovation and scale, do you feel whether you got it right first time or not, it doesn't really matter. But, what is the sort of kind of person or people that help maintain speed and clarity for both that innovation and scaling?
I'm going to quote Stephen Bartlett. Dragon Den. I really like him. He keep posting about jobs that he want to attract people, and one of the things he keep talking about is he keeps saying, I don't care about the CV, I care about the attitude. So I am actually very much in the same sort of school of thought as Stephen. I think attitude is very important. Having the right people who want to work hard, want to work with you, they have the qualities, personality and the alignment with your business culture, all of that is actually very important. But there is a very big difference between the kind of business that Stephen, for example, is doing, which is actually very much, mainly technology led, and what we do in water and environmental expertise is very important because you are actually dealing with things that are very sensitive. So you can't actually just simply say, okay, well, I want someone who has the attitude, but not the credibility. So you really need the credibility and the expertise. So I think it's a difficult combination between the two. But I think finding the right people is important, and I'm actually taking my time to do exactly that.
Yeah, we had the head of people from Zampler on last week or week before, and one of the sort of policies almost they have in place for hiring is you hire for value fit rather than culture fit. If you hire for your values, you will end up spitting out the right type of people. And then, with that sort of in mind, what hires have made a real tangible difference? Almost made you think, why didn't we hire this person earlier?
So that question is a little bit difficult for me to answer because we are still a small company and we haven't made any hires. We remained lean. So everyone who's involved in the business is involved in the business on a consultancy capacity. And we kept it like that for a very good reason because we didn't want it to close the business in a rigid way before we have the complete setup. So we are still working on that. But if I'm gonna go with the first hire, I think my first hire is gonna be a person who's gonna lead the intelligence layer for the business. So that person is gonna be an expert in AI and building these sort of technologies, because this is critical actually for us. So I'm
Yeah.
actually looking for someone who is, a leader in that space, who potentially could actually join the business.
Okay, that's good. And then what about though, from just sort of general experience, where have you seen companies getting, that wrong? Is it, maybe a salesperson too early, or, have you sort of seen things like where you're seeing a theme where companies often get that hiring sort of, initial hires wrong?
I've seen that quite a bit actually in my previous roles. And sadly, some companies, they go for, either the appearance, the CV, which states, worked in different places, without looking at what exactly you said, Alex, which is the fit into the mission of the value of the business and the culture. So these things do happen, and I think the most dangerous one is when you make a hire and you haven't completed the thought about what that new hire is gonna do exactly. So you go for a very fancy title, for example, and then the person comes in business, and then you start thinking, okay, right, how I'm gonna how can I fill the hours for this person? What exactly is that person is gonna do? And I think what I also seen is that the end of that hire isn't actually pleasant either, because when you go and hire someone who has a profile in their field and all of that, and then in a few months time you say, I'm very sorry, we don't have anything for you to do, you are made redundant, or you know let you go. I think that's very dangerous, because these people, especially these people who have a very strong profile, they will move, but they won't be talking pleasantly about a business who don't know what they are actually doing.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things that we see is, and I do understand, I do get how this happens, but it happens too much, is that they have someone that's maybe at a big player and they think that transition to a startup, because they've got a black book, or, probably that's what get them excited. They think they're going to get them in with lots of companies quite easily, which is obviously very hard at the moment as well. But people going from that transition where you've got a team of people that maybe do different parts of the process, are going to a startup, which is really, really tough, but you're then doing everything, that generally doesn't work. But we see that time and time again. And then you are right. Then they're into a situation of, they don't want to do the role, and you've got to make them redundant, and you've just gone too early. But that's a really common one that we see for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I probably seen this probably a lot in the places where the business is building an innovation, meaning trying to build products, and instead of bringing the right person who should be an engineer, who can actually make the product development happen, they go for an academic. Nothing against the academic, but the academic places is in the R&D and not in the product development. So, and it's fascinating, because I've seen these mistakes again and again and again.
Yeah. Yeah. So to talk about managing complexity, what would you say is the biggest source of complexity in your business today? And also, how are you trying to simplify that?
I think in our space there is two things are worth mentioning. Number one is funding. Accessing funding for any R&D development you want to do as a business that's actually building technology is becoming harder and harder. And I think we know about the funding streams in the UK, how hard it is actually. The amount of money actually available for technology development isn't much for businesses. So it's actually quite a challenge. I know in the UK we have the Innovate UK, which is a great in some areas, but it takes very long time. If you are building a business, to chase a grant application, that's not a business. You can't actually do that. The business is gonna break at some point. I guess It's the only other place, where you can feed in your R&D is to go and try and be successful in some related bids, but these are also not very easy. The investors' appetite in the water and environment space isn't that much in the UK. I don't think this is the same if you are in a life sciences space or a technology development space. I think people would be talking about something very different. There is more money in that compared to our own sector. So this is probably one challenge and one complexity. You have to navigate different sources of funding, and you have to go and knock lots of doors, industry wise and partners and all of that. And you have to go and try and find if you could actually be more successful internationally. So this add another layer to complexity, how you are going to deal with that. And are you going to open an office, internationally, and who's going to deal with it and who's going to lead it? So it becomes very, very complicated very, very quickly. I think the other area about complexity, which is direct to our own business, um, is data. So, because what we are actually doing, we are trying to fill in the translation gap. And in order to fill a translation gap, what you need to have access to data. You need to build tools, and some of the tools that could actually build could be actually machine learning, could actually be databases, could be actually AI. But the challenge here is that the technology is moving super fast. So today, for example, we hear about one LLM model that you could actually use. Tomorrow, that LLM model is not good enough, so you have to move on and use something else. So the technology is moving super fast, and the ability to provide that stability, that credibility to the customer in terms of the tools you are actually developing, it's not impossible, but it's actually a challenge. And it's, again, adding another layer of complexity in what we are actually developing. I think the very first thing I would probably do is to go and bring the right people around me from the industry, work with industry more directly. I think the mistake we've done when we started, which actually caused the delay for Nanolyse growth, was we worked from a university, and there were a disconnect between academia and what really the industry is actually looking for, and then the market needs. So, and I think that's sort of the invisible layer is still there. I think there is lots of very bright ideas in universities, but no one want to buy it because there is no market for it, right? So I would actually say yes. Probably I would probably have surrounded myself with people from industry, and probably I would have worked with industry more directly.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. I mean, why would you not? But hindsight's a wonderful thing, unfortunately, isn't it? And then, okay, so on that on that sort of thread, looking ahead, what is it you feel could become harder from here for Nanolyse?
Well, I hope everything will become easier and simpler for us. I think what we've done so far, I think we built a refreshed strategy for the business. We are much more focused on what we want to do, and I think the offering we are now offering around the translation and filling the gap from discovery to piloting and implementation in the water, environmental, and mining sector is needed. Everyone actually in the water industry I spoke to, they are all talking about implementation. They don't want piloting, they want implementation, because there is lots of solutions around, and they want to bring it to reality. So I think hopefully the pathway is going to be clear for us. We know what we want to do. I think the challenge for us would be, the investment is very key. We are very ambitious. We want to grow very fast, but we will need the capital. So I think for us, that's the challenge we see, finding the right investors who would like to put the money in and help us grow the business. Yeah, apart from that, I think the other challenge would be, finding the right people, but we are working on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, I think wish you all the best. I think it's a really exciting business, and what you're trying to do is clearly needed. It's a great problem that you're trying to solve, you guys. So wish you every success. We're pretty much out of time now, but really appreciate you coming on, and I look forward to hearing how it's going in another sort of 6, 9, 12 months.
Thank you very much. And thank you for having me on the show.
Thanks, Imad.
Thank you.